The stage lights brightened as a small, shy Filipino boy walked slowly toward the center. His clothes were plain, a little worn, but his eyes carried both nervousness and hope. He clutched the microphone tightly, glancing around the massive stage that seemed far bigger than anything he had ever stood on before. For a moment, he lowered his head, as though gathering courage. One of the judges leaned forward with a gentle smile. "Hello, what's your name?" The boy answered softly, almost a whisper. He explained that he had come from a humble town in the Philippines, where life was not easy. His father worked long hours, his mother struggled to provide, and sometimes even food on the table was uncertain. Yet, through all the hardships, he found joy in singing. His voice had become not just a hobby, but a way to bring light to his family and neighbors. When another judge asked why he was here, the boy lifted his head, his eyes glistening. "I want to give my family a better life. Singing is all I have, and I believe it can help me change our future." The audience grew quiet, listening intently. There was no arrogance in his words, only sincerity. The boy's small frame seemed fragile, yet the dreams he carried were larger than life. A murmur of encouragement rippled through the crowd, some even clapping softly to give him strength. In that moment, everyone, judges, audience, and viewers at home, felt connected to him. They weren't just waiting for a performance, they were rooting for a boy with nothing but a dream, standing bravely under the bright lights, ready to give everything he had for one chance at hope. At the stage went silent as the familiar opening chords of Hotel California filled the air. The boy adjusted the microphone, his small hands trembling, but when he opened his mouth, the sound that came out was nothing short of magical. His voice, unexpectedly rich and soulful, floated through the theater with a maturity far beyond his years. At first, the judges exchanged curious glances, almost uncertain if what they were hearing could truly belong to the shy child who had just shared his story. One leaned back, eyebrows raised in surprise, while another leaned forward, captivated, her eyes widening as the boy's voice carried emotion that could only come from a heart that had lived through struggle. The audience, who had been whispering moments before, slowly grew still. It was as if the entire room held its breath, afraid to miss a single note. Each lyric was sung with such honesty that it felt less like a performance and more like a confession, raw, heartfelt, and pure. As he reached the chorus, the boy's nerves seemed to vanish. His voice grew stronger, steadier, echoing with passion and conviction. A ripple of awe moved through the crowd, and soon the quiet was replaced by murmurs of amazement. A few people clapped softly in rhythm, others wiped tears from their eyes, already moved by his gift. By the second verse, the judges were no longer. As the music swelled and the boy approached the iconic chorus, a hush fell over the theater. His eyes closed, and with a deep breath, he unleashed the full weight of his voice. The words poured out not just as lyrics, but as a story he had lived, a cry of longing, of resilience, of hope. The raw emotion in his tone transformed the classic song into something deeply personal, something uniquely his. The audience could feel it instantly. Goosebumps rippled across the room as his voice climbed higher, stronger, infused with a soulful edge that few expected from someone so young. His delivery was not a copy of the original, it was different, fresh, his own. He bent the notes with instinctive artistry, adding subtle runs that made the melody soar, his voice trembling with both vulnerability and power. Almost in unison, the audience rose to their feet, unable to stay seated any longer. They began clapping in rhythm, cheering him on as if their energy could carry him even higher. The sound of hundreds of hands echoed through the auditorium, yet his voice cut through it all, commanding attention, holding every ear and every heart. The judges were transfixed. One leaned back, eyes wide in disbelief, while another leaned forward, her hand pressed firmly over her heart, visibly moved by the purity of his performance. Another judge whispered something to his neighbor, shaking his head with a smile of awe, as if he couldn't quite comprehend the brilliance unfolding before him. On stage, the boy was no longer the shy, nervous child who had walked in moments before. Under the golden lights, with his voice soaring through the chorus, he looked like an artist, fearless, powerful, and unforgettable. The stage lights seemed to glow brighter as the boy reached the iconic chorus. He gripped the microphone tightly, his eyes closed, pouring every ounce of emotion into the words. His voice cracked slightly, not from weakness but from sheer feeling, and in that imperfection lay its beauty. It wasn't just a performance, it was as though he was bearing his soul to the world. With each line, he wove his own unique style into the timeless song, bending notes, adding subtle flourishes, and singing with a depth of passion far beyond his years. His delivery made the audience feel as if they were hearing Hotel California for the first time, transformed into something new and unforgettable. Then it happened, the crowd could no longer sit still. Row by row, people began to rise, their applause building into thunderous claps that quickly fell into rhythm with the music. The boy, lost in the moment, kept singing, his voice soaring over the steady beat of the audience's hands. The theater shook with energy, yet his voice remained steady and commanding, holding every heart in the palm of his hand. The judges sat frozen in awe. One leaned back, eyes wide, unable to believe that such a sound was coming from such a small, timid figure. Another placed a trembling hand over her heart. 6. As the last note echoed into silence, the boy lowered the microphone, his chest rising and falling quickly. For a moment, the entire theater stood frozen, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Then, a wave of cheers swept through the crowd, filling the room with thunderous applause. The boy blinked rapidly, overwhelmed, unsure if this was real. One of the judges leaned forward, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. She placed a hand over her heart, her voice trembling as she spoke. You are extraordinary," she began. "It's not just your voice, though that is beyond incredible, it's your soul, your courage, your story. You sang with honesty, with pain, with hope. You reminded us all why music exists, to move us." The audience roared in agreement, clapping and shouting encouragement. The boy covered his mouth with his hand, tears beginning to stream down his cheeks. He tried to speak but no words came, only a shy, disbelieving smile. Then, without warning, the judge pushed back her chair, rose to her feet, and slammed her hand down on the golden buzzer. The theater erupted as golden confetti shot into the air, raining down like sunlight. The boy gasped, dropped to his knees, and buried his face in his hands. He was laughing and crying at the same time, unable to contain the flood of emotions. The crowd chanted his name, over and over, louder and louder, as if to lift him higher. The other judges rushed to the stage, hugging him, lifting him up, surrounding him with warmth and pride. Cameras zoomed in on his tear-streaked face, capturing the exact moment his dream became reality. A poor, shy boy had come to sing, but now, under the golden rain, he had become a star.